So, where there's no questions, we're actually going to jump over to my screen share here, and we're going to talk about the Aboleth. So, when we want to talk about the Aboleth, there's a few major kind of things that we're thinking of when we see this creature. Not only is it a creature of, it is a kind of a godly creature. It's been something that's been in D&D lore speak. If you actually look back in here, that they've been dwelling in watery environments in the abyss and stuff like that. But they basically were rivaling gods for a very long time, and they are very much like gods. And then when the true gods appeared, they kind of got pushed away. But the Aboleths themselves have these really sharp, long-term memories that never really kind of go away. So they remember all these things that happened in their past from when the gods kind of took over and pushed them away. But not only that, they also know the memories of any creature that they've actually kind of mind controlled. And so that's one of the things they actually have, is that they have a lot of really, really cool, interesting psionics and mind control for them. So if we look at their stat array, it's actually a very interesting one where they have a lot of pluses, but their dexterity is very low, which is kind of strange and interesting. They are a large aberration, so they're going to be kind of a bigger one. They pretty much have to stick. I know it says that they have 10 feet of regular speed and 40 feet of swim speed. When you're talking about the ways this monster wants to actually attack and the way they actually want to fight in battle, they're going to want to stick to water. They're going to want to stick to their pool, and generally speaking, Aboleths have these own kind of self-contained layers and pools that they like to stick to, and that's what kind of makes them so famous. Armor class 17, really hard to hit, especially for lower level characters. If we look at hit points, 135, you see triple digits, you think that's a lot, but I can even say, and I'm sure a lot of other Dungeon Masters out there could even say, that doesn't really even seem like that much, especially given the fact and the nature of this being such a god-esque type creature, in the sense of the lore that's behind it. You can always mark that up if you want to, but the innate kind of like only 135 hit points, like a level 4 party can pump out 135 hit points if they're doing things the right way. So that's something to think about. But at the same time, if the Aboleth gets to use their turn, it's going to cause a lot of heck for a lot of those lower level parties. So it's very much, that challenge rating of 10 is kind of, I wouldn't say deceiving, but there are certain cases where lower level parties could take this on, but at the same time, in the same breath, if they all have really bad wisdom saves and stuff like that, and you know this, then they're probably going to be quite overmatched for your party. So it's something to keep in mind as you're kind of looking through it, especially where a lot of them, I mean, even there's a couple with Constitution saves, and then there's actually a Wisdom save for a couple of their things. But like I said, if you are stacking this up against a party that's not optimized for this, then it's probably, or not necessarily optimized for this particular creature, but if it's something that's like, say you've got guys that have, or if you're just an entire party of wizards with low wisdom and low constitution, they're probably going to get blown out of the water. So literally and figuratively. And even as Shadow Hunter 86 has been saying, like, he's done 90 damage in a turn as a ranger, like it's entirely possible to take this thing down pretty quickly in one turn if this thing doesn't even get a chance to go. With it not having any damage resistances or immunities, kind of makes it very vulnerable to most parties. 135 hit points can go pretty quick, especially if this thing goes last in the initiative order, which is actually quite possible given its -1 dexterity score. We keep going down. Saving throw is pretty high in wisdom, intelligence, constitution, makes sense. Skills, it's got the perception check. It's going to know the party's coming up on it. It's also got the telepathy. It's got the dark vision. It's going to know your players are coming. It's got that passive perception of 20. Nothing sneaking up on this guy. So getting surprise on him is probably going to be pretty hard, especially for your rogues, even if they are like, I mean, unless they're at the point where they have reliable talent and they can just like roll a 10 every time, plus whatever their stealth score is, they're pretty okay. If we keep going down here, so the Aboleth can breathe air and water, which is why they're amphibious, and it's important to note this specific thing about the Aboleth, and we'll get down here in the mucus cloud here in a second. They're a very interesting creature, and the way that you want to play them is going to be it's not like your typical, like, I'm just going to go in and use some of their abilities. They have very specific abilities and things that you have to keep in mind as your players are dealing with the creature. So, when we get down to this mucus cloud, when they're underwater, the Aboleth is surrounded by mucus, and anything that touches them or tries to hit them with a melee attack that's within 5 feet is going to have to make a con save. They get diseased if they fail, and that's actually a big piece of the Aboleth, is that if they get diseased, they can only breathe underwater for the next 1d4 hours. Which is huge, because that means that creature cannot leave the water, which is really bad for your players if they get stuck in this situation. We'll talk about why here in a second. We also got the probing telepathy, where they can if a creature communicates telepathically with the Aboleth, they learn their greatest desires and they can see the creature. If the Aboleths can see the creature. So it's a nice little RP thing. You can play your Aboleths as very all-knowing mind control psion, which, I mean, that's kind of what they are. They're very much a psionics mind control type. Similar to your mind flayers and stuff like that, but in a different vein, to say the least. We got our Tentacle, which again gives us another way to make that mucus cloud disease kind of come through, where they can only breathe underwater, and that stinks. So there's that. However, this time, if they fail to save, they become diseased. The disease has no effect for a minute and can be removed by any magic that cures the disease. However, after a minute, the creature's skin becomes translucent and slimy and can't regain hit points unless it is underwater. And the disease can only be removed by the heal or other disease curing spell of 6th level or higher. When the creature is outside a body of water, it will take acid damage every 10 minutes until moisture is applied to the skin for every 10 minutes that have passed. So, mucus cloud gets them stuck in the water. Tentacle really screws them over. If they fail another Constitution saving throw, because now they're in range of this tentacle at all times, pretty much, because of that reach of 10 feet, because they're stuck in the water, they're in trouble. Talk about the tail. One target, you're doing 15 damage. Great. Enslave 3 times a day. Wisdom saving throw or be charmed. The charmed target is under their control, can't take reactions. They can communicate telepathically. Whenever they take damage, the target can repeat the saving throw. However, now you have somebody on the Aboleth side, so this can very quickly swing from being a 4v1 to a 3v2 encounter very quickly with this enslavement ability, so something to keep in mind. Then we have our legendary actions. Detect, they can make perception checks. Tail swipe, they can make another tail attack, or they can use their psychic drain, which any creature that's charmed by them can take psychic damage, and they will regain hit points equal to the damage that the creature takes. So, things to keep in mind. That's just the Aboleth flat by itself. If we continue to move down into layer actions, there's some crazy stuff goes on here. So, at initiative count 20, they can use Phantasmal Force with no material components. So they can create illusions into creatures' minds, make them think that things are there. It could hurt them, it could not hurt them, unless it's illogical, then, I mean, that'll make them rationalize any illogical outcomes too. It's Phantasmal Force, it's nuts. And it can do it on any number of creatures within 60 feet of it. So, causes another issue for those creatures that are going to try and jump in the pool of water with it and try to deal with this Aboleth. So, a lot of really scary stuff here with this Aboleth. So that's what makes the Aboleth so dangerous. I know we've been talking about it here, Ben and Chave Hunter 86 or Shav Hunter 86. 135 hit points isn't that much, but if this Aboleth gets to go, or if initiative count 20 happens, a lot of crazy stuff can happen, and it can really quickly swing from one side to the other very, very fast. So, things to keep in mind. Also, pools of water within 90 feet. This is another initiative count 20 layer action. Surge into a grasping tide. So if they're within 20 feet of the pool, which is typically where the Aboleths are going to be, they must succeed a strength saving throw or be pulled 20 feet into the water and be knocked prone. Which means they're in the water. Now they can be tentacled, because this thing can swim 40 feet. Or, if they decide to try to hit it with its mucus there's so many things that can happen. So it's kind of crazy. And then any creatures in the water will take psychic damage if this thing goes off. So again, it kind of pairs really well together. We got these pools of water. Phantasmal Force. Oh, I think I'm on fire. I should jump in the water. I jump in the water. Anybody else not affected by Phantasmal Force gets pulled into the water. Third time around, now any creatures in the water, they will then take that psychic damage just from the layer as a result. So, again, very important. Huge difference in fighting this creature than a standard normal run-of-the-mill creature. If you put this Aboleth in a random pool that's not its lair, whatever. As soon as you put it into a body of water that is its lair, and typically they're in some sort of underground cavern in some sort of pool of water that is theirs, and is the reason why. And again, remember, these Aboleths are kind of god-esque, god-adjacent type creatures, these specific aberrations. They have the memories of so many generations and eons prior to them. They have all these. There's a reason why they have their own special pool. And then when we get into regional effects, it's just some really cool flavor stuff. Underground surfaces are wet and slimy. Water sources are supernaturally fouled. They can vomit as a result of drinking the water. As an action, they can make an illusion of themselves within a mile of their lair. And to any location the Aboleth has seen before, any location the charm creature has normally seen, which is also kind of crazy. If they die, then the first two effects do fade eventually. But again, these creatures are extremely powerful and extremely dangerous when they get to move. Now, if they don't get to move, it can be a different story. However, like I said, this is a very kind of tricky creature to kind of run. So if you're going to throw an Aboleth at your party, my general advice, especially when you're talking about the levels of your characters and stuff like that, if it's something that they're not necessarily going to be as well equipped to take on, like say they have low wisdom or low constitution saves, then you probably want to put a higher level party against this particular creature. If they're, you know, a bunch of clerics with with really high constitution, they might do a little bit better. So things to keep in mind as you kind of look and kind of tease out this particular monster. So I hope that was helpful, and this is actually going to wrap up the YouTube side of this discussion, which this will be on YouTube eventually. We're on Twitch right now. If you have questions, check out the quest board. But yeah, so that was the Aboleth. If you guys have questions, let me know. Until next time, happy gaming.